Sariputta, Professor Richard Thompson, whose work unpacking the mystery of the fifth canto of the Vedic cosmology is informing the work of Jayapataka Maharaj and the team serving under his direction in building the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium exhibits, what we call the West Wing. Here you see him, by the way, on the right-hand side with Nobel laureate John Searle. Sariputta's books were appreciated by several Nobel Prize winners in physics, and there are quotes from their appreciations also in the biography. Can I have the next slide, please? Sariputta Prabhu, by the way, derived his initial inspiration for going into Krishna consciousness by reading Srila Prabhupada's first book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, which was published in India in 1959 and 1960 in 2 editions of early Back to Godhead magazine, in response to an article that Prabhupada had read describing that the Nobel Prize had been awarded to 2 physicists for their discovery of antimatter. And what Sariputta Prabhu, Professor Thompson, recognized in that book was a very daring leap of creative effort to describe this spiritual vision of the universe in scientific terminology, and that turned him on. That turned him on. That maybe there's a way that the mystery of creation can be expressed in scientific language. And he dedicated the rest of his life to that purpose. Next slide, please. It's there, that ongoing boon that Srila Prabhupada brought to the world in the work of the prasadam distribution, midday meals, and other programs in India, what you might call spiritual social action, where more than 1 million plates, I want to repeat that, 1 million plates of hot, fresh, nutritious prasadam are being distributed to indigent school children around India every day. Now, I've seen this at work. Huge vats of khichdi with fresh vegetables. And it's not the same dish every day. It's rotated. There's different prasadam dishes every day. 1 million plates every day. And they have to be delivered within a half hour, because the Indian school system is such that lunches have to be served within a 30-minute period. So it's so finely organized and calibrated that the prasadam is ready, put into hermetically sealed steel tiffins, and delivered to schools across India. 1 million dishes every day. It's there also, next slide please, of course, in the kirtan culture going out around the world. Here you see Paris, the upper left, and Moscow. There are, I don't remember how many Sankirtan groups now going out daily around the world, but Prabhupada has that credit as well for fulfilling Mahaprabhu's prophecy of the holy names being sung in every town and village. Next slide, please. It's there, of course, also in the kirtan culture. The penetration of the holy names as a new category of music. If you go online, kirtan and sacred music is now populated with a lot of devotees who have become quite expert in their kirtans. There'll be some of them performing here later on today. Next slide, please. Our devotees have also become quite expert in yoga practice, and we have many experienced and very well-regarded yoga teachers who are infusing into the yoga community an understanding of the philosophy behind yoga practice. There's nothing wrong with yoga. The problem is it's just generally misunderstood. It's not completely taught. So by investing the dimension of bhakti, of devotion, into yoga practice, a lot of people are now coming to Krishna consciousness through yoga studios. This is something I've had a little experience of myself in New York. Next slide, please. And of course, this amazing, extraordinary ninth wonder of the world, the Mayapur project, which is going to do things I think we can't even imagine right now. There are already more than 1 million people a year visiting Mayapur. When this opens in 2022, that number is projected to soar past 15 million visitors every year. And there are airports and boat docks being constructed as we speak, and infrastructure being laid. It's the most amazing thing imaginable. So, next slide, please. The example that Srila Prabhupada set, rising from utter obscurity, utter poverty, utter adversity to become the most significant spiritual leader in recent history is one that we can become inspired by and understand that our role here is to not become complacent. I would like anyone to offer me one shred of evidence that you've reached the end of your rope, that you can't do something more. There is no evidence. There is no limit. This is just beginning, and every one of us here has a contribution to make to this movement. And our job now is to think very deeply, what is that mission? What is it that we can contribute to fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's mission? Next slide, please. So here's that question mark answered. Total sales currently surpassing, is it 500 million books? I can't even imagine the number, let alone that many publications about Krishna consciousness. But the idea of 500 million books and magazines having been distributed. Next slide, please. And of course, here we have the payoff. Right. Here we are, not just second, third, and fourth, or even fifth, but where's that Mataji who's into her 6th generation of devotees? Here you are. What's your name, please? 6 generations of Krishna conscious followers. Yeah. Isn't that incredible? No. Mm-hmm. So here we have it. You know, the torch being passed from one generation to next. Of course, Srila Prabhupada very, very cunningly told us when he first came, just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. I mean, you know, if we had only known that this monomythic journey awaited us, you know, and that we would have to confront every shadow in our closet, every thing that we never wanted to confront in our lives. And yet here we are. So don't run from that. Don't run from that. Just have faith that there are unseen forces at work here. Whatever the particular challenges that you're confronting, and every one of us here can plug something into that sentence. Just know that you're not alone. You have a very, very wonderful, loving, large spiritual family here ready to do whatever they can to support you in whatever your desire is to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. That's what we are. We're a spiritual family here. Here's an interesting painting to end this presentation. If we take up this challenge, I truly believe that future generations will look back at just this moment, here and now, and will judge that this had been a turning point in the forward progress of human civilization. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Oh, sure. Right. Right. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, Hare Krishna. First of all, we want to thank Yogesvara for giving such a wonderful perspective to the growth of Krishna consciousness and the efforts of Srila Prabhupada. And now he's willing to take questions. So we want to organize that because I'm sure everyone would like to contribute. But I'd like to make a plea that we ask for questions first as opposed to, elaborating on different aspects of what he's already talked about, because there may be some of us who have some issues that we would like to know about. So those of you who have questions first, and then we can take commentary after that. So I see Rameshwar's going to have a question because his hand is up first. But prior to that, I would like just to introduce one of my own, if that's okay with you. And
You got the microphone.
And yeah, okay. And that is, you began the presentation discussing the hero's journey, as described to some degree by Joseph Campbell. And I've always had the issue that in Srila Prabhupada's case, in a hero's journey, there's always inner demons to overcome. And in Srila Prabhupada's case, we never think that Prabhupada had anything demonic whatsoever. In fact, he was just a pure devotee. So how does the myth, or not the myth, but the monolith of the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell has presented it, relate to Srila Prabhupada's purity of purpose throughout his whole life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Did you all hear the question? Is it on? Is that microphone on? Okay. The question relates to how we see Srila Prabhupada, how we remember Srila Prabhupada. From one perspective, he's a Shaktavesha avatar. He never knew material conditioning. He never knew struggle as other people taking this hero journey encounter. And that was an important issue for me to deal with. I explained how I dealt with it in the beginning of the book. If you think of the story of Krishna entering the wrestling arena, and everybody in that arena seeing him in a different way, from their own particular perspective. You know, some people seeing him as the supreme personality of Godhead, others seeing him as the most worshipable object, others as the most lovable young man. I mean, everyone had a particular perspective on him. People had different perspectives on Srila Prabhupada as well, and it was a real problem for me. It was a challenge. Which level do I describe Srila Prabhupada for general readers? This book was not initially intended for devotee readers. This hopefully is a literary nonfiction work that people who have no experience of Krishna consciousness, who never heard of Srila Prabhupada, will be able to relate to. So while acknowledging the divinity of his mission and his unique character as a pure devotee of the Lord, I also permitted myself to follow the trajectory of the life as it would be perceived by people who don't understand that dimension of his character, so that there's something there to relate to. And the challenge was doing that without making him appear like a mundane person. And so you'll judge for yourself and tell me whether I've been successful or not. I've done my best. So we'll see. Certainly there was a difficult assignment. Yeah. Other questions?
You've partly just answered it. I was going to ask you to really explain. We have the Prabhupada Lila Amrita for devotees. And I was going to ask you to explain what you see as the role of this book and how you see its possible impact in the Karmi world.
I had a long talk with Satsvarup Maharaj before starting this project, and he very graciously encouraged me in this, and I explained for him that the purpose was not to reinvent the Lilamrita. The purpose was to have a single volume biography that would be a literary narrative flow for people who expect from a book, a biography, something that's engaging, something that has a storyline to it, a problem that has to be solved, a trajectory where the protagonist encounters obstacles along the way. There's a penultimate confrontation and a denouement, a resolution at the end. So it follows that trajectory of Srila Prabhupada's story. We have many memoirs of Srila Prabhupada. We have many diaries of Srila Prabhupada's life and mission. We didn't have, to my way of thinking, a one-volume telling of his life story that would be of appeal to non-devotee readers. And that was my hope here. And so far as its impact, people have embarked, people everywhere are looking for spiritual life. You cannot do a personality profile on someone who's ready and ripe for Krishna consciousness. You just can't. You can't say, well, they're vegetarian, or they practice yoga, or they've been, divorced. Or you can't profile a candidate for Krishna consciousness. People everywhere are looking for this. So my hope is that it's an honest account that will reach people who see that somebody cared enough to come for them and give them the full picture, an airplane view of spiritual life, because they don't get it. What do they get? You go to a yoga studio, what do you get? What do you know about spiritual life? You don't get it. Where are you going to go? Church, synagogue, a mosque? What are you going to know about the personality of Godhead, the eternality of the soul, the relationship of love and devotion that binds them, how that applies in the world, how the material energy acts? Think about all the knowledge that Prabhupada gave us. I've tried my best to invest in that story, his teachings. I think that's what he would have wanted. So hopefully it will give people an airplane view of the spiritual journey. Yes, Madhumati?
Thank you for a nice presentation. I was wondering if, while writing this book and doing all the research, you came across something about your Gurudev that you didn't know, that you learned in the process of research. Like one new thing you learned.
Every
that
day.
Struck you. Wow.
Every day, every single day there was something new that I was learning. And it was a remarkable experience rediscovering my own relationship with my spiritual master. I mean, when I was with him, I didn't know any of this stuff. How much did we know when we were with Srila Prabhupada? We've had the benefit, if you will, of all these years to do research. Siddhanta's wonderful memory recordings, the memoirs, I mean, all of that's a rich cache, archive of material with which to deepen our Bhakti Vikash Maharaj's biography of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, all of this wonderful material that we have now. It was like rediscovering. I cannot. This was a very emotionally difficult project for me. I did half the book in tears because I didn't know. I didn't understand. Just the depth of his sacrifice. I mean, what he went through. I mean, he may have been a Shaktivesh avatar and didn't know emotions or pain or suffering like we do, but I did, reading about it. And my gratitude and my debt to him just went through the roof. Every day was a revelation of what he went through, every detail. The adversity, the calumny that was heaped upon him. People he'd be distributing back to Godhead. People would be yelling down, "Go away, we don't want you around here." Imagine yelling at him, trying to give them a back to Godhead knowledge of Krishna, They just saw another poor person in rags. That's all they saw. They didn't understand. And he just kept going. He just kept going, kept going. He had such faith that this was going to happen. Boy, did he have faith in his spiritual master. Oh my gosh. My Guru Maharaj wants this, it's going to happen. That's it. End of story. Nothing got him down. Just, he kept going, kept going.
Pushta Krishna Das. I'd like you to elaborate on this after I throw this out there because I think it's very timely. One of the things...
It's on, just hold it closer.
One of the things we sometimes hear about is that, there were so many hippies and they were attracted to Srila Prabhupada. But I want to take that back one step. The reason that people became hippies or free thinkers or what have you was because they were disaffected with the goals that had been presented to them as what constitutes success in life. And so they rebelled. And I think you see some of that happening today amongst young people, like, for example, with Bernie Sanders' movement and the way that, sociologically speaking, people are changing and the way new thoughts about what success constitutes are. So I think more than anything else, why didn't every hippie become a devotee of Krishna. They didn't because Srila Prabhupada redefined what the goals, what the problems are in life, and then what the goals are in life and what success constitutes. And I'd like you to, maybe if you can, elaborate on that, because I think that more than anything else, that is a very potent preaching concept that people who are now working so hard, being driven into the ground by what they're told constitutes success, and finding at the end that there's only death and loss, have something here that, whether they have an occupation or don't have an occupation, or don't know what life is about, or think they know what life is about, can we really redefine what success is for everybody through the Krishna consciousness movement specifically?
Right. Brilliant question. Absolutely brilliant. And the answer is yes, of course we can do that. But there's a paradigm shift required in how we go about things. Our traditional foundational principles and programs must be maintained. But we've got to get a little more creative about what we're doing in the world. This is 50 years later. The nature of language has changed. The sense of words has changed. The challenges confronting humanity have changed. There was no climate change in 1966. There was no ISIS in 1966. These are things that are of our day. And my conviction is that our responsibility is to evolve a new language. I mean, I'm repeating myself now. But each sphere of human endeavor has its own vocabulary. The field of medicine has its own vocabulary. The field of science and physics has its own vocabulary. The field of agriculture has its own vocabulary. The field of genetics has its own vocabulary. Every one of these different areas. And we have something to say in areas of armed conflict, areas of poverty, areas of environmental danger, the rights of women, children, exploited minorities. We have a comment. We have a valid contribution to make there, but we don't have the language. And I think it's a very serious responsibility for us to get an inside understanding of what those challenges are, so that when we speak, it's not just platitudes. That's the risk. We risk continually being marginalized as long as all we have to offer the world is platitudes. You really want to take people to take Krishna consciousness seriously? You've got to go inside their life and understand what they're confronting in that language and be able to apply Krishna consciousness in that way. And that's what Prabhupada did in his day. We have to do similarly.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, excuse me, my name is Prabhupada Jivandas. Thank you for coming here.
Hare Krishna.
In the Bhagavad Gita, it says in the beginning that do your prescribed duty. And in the end, it says surrender everything.
Give up all duty.
So if you kindly would explain I have this difficulty in applying both at the same time, meaning at what point do you give up your prescribed duty and begin surrendering?
Mm-hmm. All right, this is one of the three questions I hope no one's ever going to ask me. And I'm not going to tell you what the other two questions are. From a strictly philosophical point of view, what has to be given up is the obsessive attachment to the results of our effort. Sometimes it's called fruitive action. When Krishna tells Arjuna, give up all other dharmas and just surrender unto me, he's not telling him to leave the battlefield and become a sannyasi. He's telling him, stick to your dharma. So what is it that he's asking him to give up? It's that material insecurity that was compromising the execute of that dharma with a full heart. Arjuna gave all kinds of intellectual reasons in the first and second chapters why he shouldn't fight. And Krishna said to him, Kutas, why are you doing this? You understand better. So progressively throughout the Gita, Krishna is bringing Arjuna to a place not where he becomes detached from his Dharma. I think more harm has been done in the name of this one word, detached, than any other word I can think of. It's been used as an excuse for indifference. It's been used as an excuse for being irresponsible. It's been used as an excuse for lacking compassion for others. It's the most horrible idea. I'm just detached from all that now. How far away from actual Vaishnava character can you get than that? So what Krishna is compelling Arjuna to do is to go deeper inside his Dharma. Give up your misconceptions. Give up all distractions, all other dharmas that distract from what you have to do. And what we have to do is stay where we are, not run away from it. I've never heard Prabhupada ever say, run away from your problems and just surrender to Krishna and to hell with the rest of the world. I never heard him say that. There was a time in ancient history when your Krishna conscious progress meant going away from society, going away from the world, away from Dharma, away from everything else, and just you meditate, you do your yoga, and you go back to Godhead. Those days are long gone. The world is way too interactive now, and what we do influences the lives of others halfway around the globe. And now your spiritual progress is intimately connected to the contribution you make to the progress of everybody around you. We're a community here. And our spiritual life is working within this community to serve others. So there's no question of giving up Dharma. None whatsoever.
Yoga. And then he talks about transcendental knowledge, which is better than sacrifice. And finally, Arjuna says, well, first you tell me this, then you tell me that. Now you, Krishna, please tell me what is best. And Krishna says the results can be achieved by both approaches. But which is better? It is work and devotion, which is Krishna consciousness. So your answer is there, and Krishna has given it. And Prabhu is resounding. Other questions? I have
So in making this biography and doing all this research, certainly, Yogesvara Prabhu, you must have come across the fact that the example that Srila Prabhupada gave was somewhat different in various instructions that he wrote. And you mentioned a bit earlier about, for example, we have to relate to women's rights, and we see that what Prabhupada wrote about women and how he treated women was very seemingly or apparently very different. And this was true in terms of something like him taking Vanaprastha. We see that what we're learning about taking Vanaprastha to prepare for it, make sure our families are provided for, etc. But at the same time, we see Srila Prabhupada actually left the 13-year-old son. Vrindavan Day was 13 when he left, and he didn't actually leave his family with any means of support as far as I know. So we see this kind of difference between precept and example, and I'm wondering how you, as you went through your process of doing this
That was a
biography.
big one. That was a big one.
So
that was a
you can-
huge one. How do you overlook the fact that he left his family? I mean, that was the one thing my editor said to me as she was reading this manuscript. She's a brilliant editor, Kira Ryan. She said, I love Prabhupada. Reading your book, I love Prabhupada. But this one thing, how could he leave his family? Couldn't get that. So I had to spend pages explaining, that if you're told by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, you go there and you do that, That's an exceptional situation. And there are some exceptional sacrifices that have to be made. As far as I know, no one else was given that instruction by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati here in this room. The example of Srila Prabhupada that we are meant to follow is not the person who had to give up his family in order to bring Krishna consciousness to the West to save our sorry souls. That's not the example that he asked us to follow. I'll tell you something that I usually don't say in classes. In Paris, I went to see him, and he said, "Oh, Yogesvara, how's your wife?" Because the first thing he was always asking me, he'd see me, is, "How's your wife?" I was getting frustrated. I'm a person. Why is always asking about her? Yeah, so she's fine. And he, okay, that's good. Don't fight. He said, husband and wife should love each other. Otherwise, the relationship becomes dry. Those were his words to me. You know. So this from the person who had to do something extraordinary because of that extraordinary situation. Not because he wanted us to do that. That was never the point. Never the point. Just as Arjuna is on the battlefield. If anyone here is in the military, maybe the idea of doing your Dharma means picking up weapons and fighting and killing. But if you're not in the military, that's not the example you're meant to follow. The example you're meant to follow is one of overcoming your hesitations to do what you have to do in your life. That's a very different thing. Is that okay?
So how does that also extend to numerous examples of precept and example being different in the books as opposed to how Prabhupada acted?
I don't know about you guys, but any time someone picks a quote from Prabhupada about women are less intelligent or black people are ugly or this or that or who knows what, I scratch my head in wonder over this kind of destructive, obsessive, infantile preoccupation with finding a reason to reject Prabhupada and his teachings. I cannot understand it to save my life, except the only answer that comes to mind is that we are so petty and so fallen, we will use any excuse to avoid the hard work of actually becoming Krishna conscious. Any excuse at all. Poison theories. They didn't go to the moon. Whatever. So I'm not going to I'm not going to chant my rounds because of that? You know, what? How silly, how foolish. You know, he's giving us back our relationship with God, you know. And we're going to use these little moments of cultural discrepancy to reject the whole thing? That's madness. That's utter madness. And if you knew Prabhupada, you'd realize that while he may have had some washover from those cultural backgrounds in his writing, as a human being, as a person, oh my gosh, you could not have wanted someone better as a spiritual master. He had such love for everybody. He would kick the sannyasis out of the front of his car so the women could have a place to sit down. I mean, come on. Let's get real. That's silly. Thanks for the question, though.
Are there any more questions? We have about 12 minutes left.
I just have one comment.
Hey, what's up, sister?
Prabhupada's called... Oh, okay. Prabhupada said that, because I think that he was posed that question once, that he gave up his family, and Prabhupada mentioned that all his disciples were now his children. Do you remember that?
Sure, of course.
Yes.
I mean, you know, Krishna gave him, he said, I had 5 children, now I have hundreds of children. So, but something else you need to remember as well, Prabhupada never turned his back on his family. He did what he had to do. He had a very important mission. And in his will, in his last will and testament, he provided for his family. He told Abhiram, he said, why was I so strong with my family? He said, I've got a haughty nature. And Abhiram said, well, what do you want to do about it? And he said, well, at least they shouldn't starve. And Abhiram said, well, you know, you're an author. You could give them royalties from your books. And Prabhupada thought, and he said, how much do you think I should give him? And Abhiram said, gave him a number that's the equivalent of a, healthy middle-class income. And in Prabhupada's will, he put that number. His family member, they were taken care of. Even in his last will, in his last weeks of life, he was thinking about the well-being of his family. So let's just dispel this whole notion that somehow he was insensitive to his family. That's just wrong. When I talked to his son, Vrindavan Chandra Day, I said, you were there when Prabhupada got on the Jaladuta. What was that like for you? He said, what do you mean, what was it like for me? Psychologically, this was my father. He was going off to do amazing things, but for me, I was losing my father. I was crying like a baby, but I was so proud of him. I was so proud of him for what he was doing. Maybe some of his brothers and sisters didn't feel quite that, they were more bitter about it. But at least Vrindavan Chandra, he understood. Wow, well, look what my father is doing. He was very proud of his father. So there's this whole misunderstanding about Prabhupada and his family. See a hand?
My name is Nandini Radha Devidasi, and thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'm very eager to read the book right now, but I have a little question. If I want to present this book into academia, which I hope to, being in that sphere myself, how should I present this book without being overly spiritual or religious about it? What would be your recommendation?
Well, that's my former department, is religious studies at Hofstra, and you can get away with things there if what you're looking at is the spiritual journey within different traditions. So if it's presented as an example of the life of a distinguished teacher within the Vaishnava tradition, and the foundations of that tradition, and how this individual was able to translate those foundations into a Western cultural environment, there you have the migration of religion around the world, which is something that we are confronting every day with other cultures. Islam becoming such a prominent place in American culture. This is arguably an ideal example of the implantation of those, so-called Hindu ideas into American culture. So that's one way of doing it. There are other courses in religious studies that look at the mystic experience, mysticism and the spiritual quest. And there it might be part of a comparative study with Christian mysticism and Kabbalistic studies, etc. This mystic dimension of the invisible universe described in the Puranas, and the soul's journey back to the spiritual realm. So that's another way of approaching it. That would be in conjunction with a book such as Evelyn Underhill's book, simply called Mysticism, written in 1902. So you could combine books that way, make it part of a course of study with recommended reading. We can talk more about that if you like afterwards.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
I'll tell you what, let's give someone else a chance, because we only have a few minutes left, Poster Prabhu. I apologize.
It's kind of an interesting insight. I was in Vrindavan in... Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. When Vrindavan Chandra Day came to visit Prabhupada, Brahmananda and I were the only ones in the room. And Prabhupada wanted to help his son. And he said, you can distribute my books in Orissa and Bengal. I'll give you exclusive rights to distribute there. And then he said to Brahmananda, so you write it up. And if he doesn't distribute the books within 6... No, I'm giving a little... Let me finish. I'll be finished in a few seconds. He said if he doesn't distribute the books, he loses the right. Within 6 months, he loses the right. So Prabhupada was trying to help his son, but not at the expense of Krishna consciousness. It's a very interesting insight.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Okay, so our next speaker is scheduled for noon, and I want to give everyone a chance to their dietary break, those that are Brahman initiated, and also just to stretch a little bit. First, I want to offer my humble gratitude to Yogesvara Prabhu, who came 3,000 miles to give us this wonderful opportunity.
It was 2, now it's 3.
2?
Actually, 10,000 miles.
But moreover, I want to be a megaphone to plug his book, because this is a really great opportunity to get your autographed copy, and he's not, I would say, either bold enough or impolite enough to do it himself. So I want to do that, and I want to ask you, how can they obtain a copy, and when can they get it, and etc.?
It's in Barnes & Noble. It's on Amazon.com. You can get it at the gift store.
But how can they get one that has an autograph by the author?
What if I park myself outside and just whoever would like to come by? Is that okay?
And where would they get the book? Upstairs?
I don't know. I thought they were going to put a table out there, but I'm not sure.
There may be a table in the front, or you may have to go up to the book shop, up to the gift shop, but you can all obtain a personalized autographed copy if that's meaningful to you. It's very meaningful to me. The title of the book is Swami in a Strange Land, and the
How Krishna Came to the West.
How Krishna Came to the West, and I encourage everyone to get a copy. If they don't keep it themselves, they could read it and then pay it forward, which is always the best thing to do with books.
It's a little pricey, actually. It's $29.95.
$29.95.
Mandala made it very heavy so they could bump the price
And
up.
we do want to support the devotees who are going out and giving the public a chance to have association with Srila Prabhupada, so that at the $30 it does more than buy a book. So our next speaker is His Grace Dhananjaya Prabhu. Now, he's traveled in the aggregate about 9,000 or 10,000 miles to be here from UK, and he has a delicious palette of stories from the early days in UK onward, and Amsterdam and other places. And we are very privileged that he's here with us, because we don't get devotees that travel that far usually to come to our festival. So I want to urge everyone, take a quick stretch break. In 5 minutes or 6 minutes, we'll reconvene and we will listen to the nectarian pastimes from Dhananjaya's Lotus Lips. Thank you very much, Yogesvara Prabhu. May you come back year after year. Not to the material world, but at least to our New Dwarka land here.